Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk a little bit today, a bit more about primitives. And what I'd like you to do first is just grab a cube and let's drop this into our viewport. And then let's go in the objects palette. Let's just make this, 3 segments per side, okay? So that we have, several points and planes to work with. All right, and then let's make this object editable. Okay, I'm going to make this thing editable. Now, what I want to do is let's say, for example, that we want to work with several different points all at once. There's different ways of selecting the points of the objects. So if we go to the points tool on the left side there, we can scroll over and we can individually select each one of these points. But there's also some other selection tools that are available. So if up at the top left, you notice there's this little cursor with a circle around it. If you click and hold that down, there are some other types of selection tools. So this one is just sort of grabbing a point, individual points. There's also this one that allows you to drag a window across a section of points. So if you drag that over the whole thing, it will grab all the points that in that view. You can also grab this one that looks like a little squiggly circle. You can grab that guy. Just double click outside of here. There we go. And you can circle an area and grab those points. Okay? So that's another way of selecting points. And then finally, this one is you can create like a box or a polygram around a certain area and select those options as well. Go back to the beginning, and then it'll select those. So sometimes those are really important when you're trying to render some of those options. Let's just go back to that first selection tool, which is the cursor with the circle around it. Now here's an important element when selecting different options. Okay, if you look at the attributes palette on the right side, you can see where it says select only visible elements. Okay. Now what this means is I can only select, like if I grab a point right here, let's say I select these 3 points. If I move around the object, the points on the other side are not selected. Okay. But let's say, for example, what if I wanted to select a whole layer of points? What I can do here is I can sort of get to a point of view where I'm looking directly at the object. So I'm moving the view to be right down on center. If I click this off where it says only select visible elements, if I click that off and then I click and drag across those points, all right, what's going to happen is when you rotate around this, all of the points on that area have been selected. Okay, so this becomes really important when you want to model certain areas. If I were to take this and move all of these points over to the left, you see that whole object is now starting to move accordingly because all of those elements have been selected. Okay, so this becomes really important when you're working with different modes of modeling. And you'll notice what happens is you can do that with other elements than just points. So for example, if I wanted to move to the edges, okay, I could do the same thing with the selection tool selected. If I click only select visible elements, I can drag across a bunch of these lines, and the same thing is true. All of those elements are going to be selected accordingly. So this becomes really important when you're trying to model different elements. Let's just show one more example of that. I'm going to go back to my individual cube here and click on the polygons tool, and again, only visible elements is off, and I'm just going to select one entire side like that. When I rotate around to the other side, notice how both of them are selected. Okay, and then this is especially when you're dealing with symmetrical objects. If I were to take this side then and scale it down, okay, you see it scales symmetrically on both sides together. All right, if I scale it up, I could scale it down because I've selected both of those sides simultaneously. Now I can get really accurate symmetry between those objects. All right. So this is a really great way of dealing with working with those different types of modes. So there was a few questions that came up about different types of primitives. One was someone was asking about making a half of a sphere. Okay, and when thinking about modeling a half of a sphere, it could be rather difficult. You could select certain areas and delete different elements. But another way that you can do that is just by simply using the attributes manager. So whenever you bring in a primitive, always check out the different object attributes. So on the bottom right hand side, if I click on objects, notice where it says type, okay? Right now I have a perfect sphere, but if I go to type with standard sphere, it's just going to be that, perfect sphere. I can choose all of these different other elements too. So a tetrahedron is going to be different types of a combination of polygons. Hexahedron, all of these things are going to allow you to change and manipulate forms in different ways. Okay, so if you were to select some of those triangles and pull them out, you'd get a much different sort of feel for the object. The other thing is you can create what's called a hemisphere, so which is literally a half of a sphere. Okay, notice how the inside is hollow, but that allows you to create different elements by instead of worrying about cutting and chopping and pasting and all of those sort of things. Check the attributes manager, because a lot of times you can deal with an object by just working with some of those different palettes. All right, I'll get rid of that sphere. Another one that I think is really helpful is the Platonic. Okay, and this one I want you to check out too, because there's different combinations. When you go to type in the attributes manager, you can have a tetrahedral, which is just simply a four-sided pyramid. There's a hexahedral, which is obviously a six-sided box. Octahedral, which is a bit more octahedral in terms of it has 8 sides total. So you can really change this simply by just going in and changing the different type. And then one of my favorites is the buckyball. This is modeled after Buckminster Fuller, and it's sort of that geosphere, biodome kind of looking object. So check it out. When you go to the primitives, there are many different ways of utilizing those different forms. So check that out in the attributes, and that might be really helpful for you.